All right, hopefully you guys get something out of this. I know you will, because like in my last video, it's been pretty popular that springs do make a difference in a Strat's tone. Well, I'm gonna hopefully prove it to you here and give you some pointers. So just stick with me. Please be patient. I think you'll learn something. I know I have, which is pretty interesting. But just to give you a quick example of what I'm talking about, we're going to use this black 1964 original Strat as the benchmark for everything. Original springs. Now it doesn't have the original block, but I think this is a Callahan block. This is a Callahan block. This is the original Gotoh block that came with the Nash. This is actually a Nash Strat. And this is the original block on the 62 car Strat. Now, the first discovery I made was, every piece of wood, every guitar has its resonant frequency. It's, an acoustic guitar is a resonator. The wood vibrates in, I forgot the name, but it vibrates with the strings to amplify the sound. So a solid body guitar does the same thing. So your springs play a big part in the sound of a Strat. They're like a small reverb in the back. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. But the strings are attached through the block and through the springs. And I'm always an advocate of 5 springs. And I'll show you why. A lot of people say, well, I like 3 springs better. And that's because they're too tight. If you have high tension springs, which you shouldn't really have, they're not vintage correct, you're going to end up with 3 springs, because that's the only thing you can do to make the bridge float like you would like it to, because the springs are too tight. But that's one of the things I'll illustrate here. And in this whole process, what happened was, I have been working on this Seafoam Green 57 reissue that I bought back in '86. And I did everything to it except mess with the springs. Now you can see it doesn't look like all the springs are the same. These are shiny and these are a little duller. A lot of times you can tell the vintage versus the aftermarket springs, because they'll be dirty and kind of dusty. I cleaned these off to make them resonate and ring a little bit better, which I somewhat wish I wouldn't have, because I could identify them a little better. These you can see are a little dirtier, but they're not all exactly the same. And what happened was, I'd been messing with springs, and I have plenty of springs. Here's some more over here. And here's a bag of springs, and then here's the raw vintage that I'm going to put on and show you that they do work. But I inadvertently mixed up some springs along the line. I never mixed these up. I always made sure that I kept these on here. But in the process of messing with these guitars, I had maybe switched springs, and that's what started this whole process. I was trying to get my springs back lined up, because I would measure them, count the loops, which I'll go over that in a minute. Count the loops. Some of them have 39, some have 40, some have 41. And so that didn't help me. Then I would measure the OD, and the ODs were mostly pretty close, like 0.33 inches. And then the diameter of the wire, which was mostly all consistent at 0.053 or so. So that didn't help me identify it. So I came up with this crazy idea, this contraption over here, where I could test the tension of springs. So these are very high tension springs that came with the Nash guitar on the Gotoh bridge. And let me set this up so I can show you what I'm talking about. One thing that you can do with these is just take them like this and bend them. And you can kind of tell these pop back pretty hard, and they're pretty hard to bend. They pop back really solid. And these are the ones that convince me that springs make a difference. And if you don't believe me, there's quite a few pros out there that know that they make a difference, like Eric Johnson. And I mean, he's been through this before, and I think I know what happened to him, and I'll show you in just a second. Okay, here's a raw vintage, and I certainly don't want to get them mixed up, but that's what this over here is for. It's a fish scale. I bought a $10 digital fish scale so I could measure the tension on these things, and it's kind of a primitive way of doing it, but it was all I could think of, and it actually works. But here's the raw vintage springs. I just got them. They don't snap back real hard, and they're way easier to bend. Let's look at these, and they're actually bigger OD too, if you can see. Now this is the tight one, pops right back, and these are the soft ones, and you can feel it when you bend them like that. So either way, let's not get these mixed up. But to test the tension on them, I came up with this crazy contraption over here. Let me see if I can set it up to where you can see me doing it. Okay, you can see these marks right here. A tight spring. What I'm doing is I'm hooking the spring up here. I drilled a little hole in this piece of block 2x4, clamped it to my table, hooked the fish scale into there, and I turned it on, and I pulled to 15 pounds. It's not the easiest thing to get right to 15 pounds, but there was such a difference between the soft springs and the hard springs that it didn't make that much difference. These lines right here are most of the ones that are the really stiff springs, and this line way here, right here, is the raw vintage spring. Now I have yet to take off the benchmark 1964 springs, and you're going to witness that with me when we do the test. Let's see if I can get you in there a little better. All right, so all I do, turn this baby on. Since I've already got the marks, hopefully you can see the digital readout. And it stretches that spring pretty far, and I try to get as close to 15 as I can, right there. And you can see that it's pretty much lined up with this mark. Now the only thing I don't like about this fish scale is it locks after a few seconds, and it'll hold the measurement, so it's not a continuous thing, so you have to start over. If you push this tear button, it'll go back to 0. And this line here is the looser raw vintage. This is what started it for me with the green guitar. So then this thing's just not sounding as good as this white guitar. Sounds amazing. The green guitar, I've been working on it a lot, and it sounds good, but it just doesn't have the ring. And I think I figured out why. But what alerted me on the issue was, see how far this claw is? I don't know if you can get an idea of the measurement. Let's use my finger. I don't have a tape measure here. I guess I could use this thing maybe. And then you come over here. This is the claw. Same exact gauge strings, the Hendrix gauge, and same exact float off of the body, where I can bend the bar back and pull the strings up just about a half of a step. Now you can see the difference. I said, man, same exact setup, same strings, but yet I have to back these strings way out to get the bridge to float. So to me, those springs are too tight. That's why a lot of times guys will say, well, I only use 3 springs. Well, when you got these super tight springs, you're going to use 3 because that's the only way you can keep this thing at a reasonable depth and still have it floating. But I am a proponent of 5 springs. Stevie Ray used 5, Hendrix used 5, Fender designed the Strat with 5. And the more steel I say, the more connection to the body. So you want that steel there to connect the strings through the claw to the body. Gives you more energy. So listen to this. This will be interesting. Okay, this is the benchmark. Listen to this. All the springs are ringing at the same frequency. Nice ring, like a reverb. Listen to this one. Now these are the raw vintage springs. Different frequency. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun. It's almost a whole step difference, right? Okay, now we get over here to the 62 Strat with possibly mixed springs. Now, the one thing that I may have noticed with this one is when I bought this guitar, I'm not so sure it had all the same exact original springs in it, because I'm finding out that this one has 41 loops and these all have 40. So that's not good. And then I thought I may have had these mixed up with this one. But listen to this one. And that's what I'm trying to do, is figure out which ones are mixed up, because you can tell these are shiny, these are dull, and I'm trying to match them all up again. Listen. Now, did you notice that one of them, these two here, are almost a half a step higher? These three are the same. Same note. Same note as the black Strat. The benchmark. What do you think of that? Now listen to these two. But almost a flat half step higher. So I want those to be the same. I can't absolutely scientifically say that that's going to make that much difference, but for me personally, I'd rather have them all the same, because this guitar is wonderful. And they're all the same, and they're the vintage springs. Now listen to this one. This is the one I've been working on. Listen to this guitar. You're going, what happened to this one? It's not ringing at all. Same exact setup, same float, but the springs are tight because I have to back this out a lot. Well, this is what I discovered. All right, I took this feeler gauge, very thin, 0.000015, and I came over here and watch this. It goes in between. Now, I could probably get a thicker one in there. I just didn't try it. I just pulled out the thinnest one I could find. Goes in there no problem. You have to get it at the right angle. Goes in there no problem, right? Now you come over here, watch this. There is no space between the coils. Nothing, nada. Not one spot. Thus, the dull sound. So I propose to you, on a vintage Strat or a good Strat, you're going to want these coils to be stretched out some. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take those, the next clip here is going to be, I'm going to put those raw vintage springs on my green Strat, and we'll pluck it again. Same setup. Yeah, I thought you might want to see this process. So I got one on already. Everybody's got their method. Mine's pretty simple. Just take it off. Put a new one on. I usually take a little screwdriver, stick it in there, and run it out here like this, and just flick it on like that. I don't know if you notice, but if you look at the strings that I'm using, I have the bullets, the Fender bullets in there. And if you can see, the ones that haven't broken, I broke a few, but the bullets are sticking out of my block. Turns out the Callahan blocks have a shallow hole, and the bullets don't go all the way in there. I was a little bit bummed on that. All right. But they still work, and they actually seem to be pretty decent strings. A little bit bright, but I have the pure nickel ones that I haven't tried. I think I might like them better. All right. Got them all switched out here. Now I'm gonna have to go get a screwdriver and adjust the claw because it's set up for those tight springs. So it's probably floating. Let's see how much it's floating now. It's probably floating a lot more than I want it to. Oh yeah, see that? See that amount of float? Can you see that? Oh, it's not easy to show you. I don't like it floating that much. So I'm gonna go tighten up the claw a little bit and we'll pluck the strings. All right, got her done. Now, I'm not gonna go play it. I went and tuned it, and all I can tell right now is the strings feel like they vibrate differently. They've got a little bit more vibration on the neck, make it maybe a little softer feeling. But you can see how much more the claw is in now. Now, one thing I did notice the difference between the vintage springs and the raw vintage is the raw vintage only has 39 loops, and the vintage springs have 41. So they have 2 extra loops, so they're just a hair longer. So next thing we're going to do is take out one of these springs and check the tension. Okay, they're pretty soft feeling. I've never done this, so you and I are going to see the results at the exact same time here. 15 pounds. Now that's interesting. Let me make a mark. Let me make a mark there, because the tension of the vintage springs is kind of in between the tight springs and the tight springs and the raw vintage springs. This is raw vintage, this is vintage, and these are tight springs, I'll call it, in this area. So the vintage are a little bit tighter. Interesting. So hopefully you got something out of that. I know that I'll let you know if this guitar, I got to switch those springs back, but I'll let you know if this guitar sounds better. And sure it will. This one sounds very good. So I'm done with those tight springs, but then I do have to figure out which one of these are going to go back on the red Strat. Next video is going to be Monday I get some new old stock, late 50s, early 60s, yellow .02 microfarad Astron caps. And I'm going to test all 6 of them and see if I can find any that don't leak. And I may stick one in my 60 Bassman because it's got a different type of cap in the normal channel right now. So that's my next video. Talk to you guys later.